Okay, good morning, everyone. This is August 31st, and this is the delivery orchestration demo call. So, first agenda item is in you, Matt.
So this is really continuing
You're really low. Is it just me or? Okay, so I try to fix my audio.
Oh, sorry, it's not just you. You are low. Sorry, I nodded at the right shape.
Okay.
Yeah, you are low, Matt.
Give me a sec. Any better?
Try again.
One sec. How's that?
Yeah, understandable. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm turned up as loud as I can feasibly go. Okay, so I'll shout. So the first item is this is all around the epic that we've got in progress around analyzing and comparing deployment of these components, CAS pages, registry, and Gitlab. So the agenda item here is really off the back of your comment that you left yesterday, Graham, or a couple of days ago, your time, which is specifically around the fact that we've gathered a lot of information, but partially due to the way that things are structured at the moment, and also just the sheer quantity of information there, it's difficult to be able to sort of cross-reference and pull out the individual pieces of information that are most relevant to what we are trying to do, and also to try and figure out exactly what pieces overall are most relevant to helping us essentially move towards achieving our OKRs, which is kind of the plumb line of the goals of what we're looking to accomplish this quarter. So the suggestion that I made in a follow-up comment and wanted to put in the agenda here for discussion is really that we try and scope down the bits in the epic that we want to drill down into deeper, or as deep as we need to be able to move us towards those OKRs. And then just sort of leave the other bits sort of on the periphery, although we've already sort of captured quite a bit of information for them already. So with the OKRs being specifically auto deploy and chat ops tagging for CAS and pages, the three areas that I've suggested, that doesn't have to be these, but my suggestion would be focusing specifically on auto deploy, enabling it for CAS. What's the diff between where things are now to where they need to get into auto deploy, versioning, and then tagging or chat ops tagging specifically.
Sorry, just interrupt quickly. I find it, and when I looked back at the OKRs, I still realized I have no clue what. I think to me this might be, and maybe this is just me. I'm sure like Alessio and maybe Myra have got more background context, but I feel like when we say chat ops tagging for like pages, that's like a couple of words that are very vague. Like, I don't understand what that actually means. Like, chat ops tagging, does that mean we write a whole new chat ops command? Does it mean the chat ops tag command we currently use supports those things? So I'm actually wondering, and I think with the CAS stuff as well, what I think I realized is I think we have some epics for these specific OKRs. And I'm interested in everyone's thoughts on this. And like, so I think we were kind of like, okay, let's go and investigate what the differences are in components to try and lead us to a solution towards this, which I think was a good idea until we opened up like this massive black hole of just, I guess, stuff. So to try and focus that down, as you're saying, Matt, we can like try and adjust what we're documenting in that epic, which I think is a good idea, as you mentioned, Matt. Like, I agree with your idea, but I'm actually also wondering if the second part to this as well is we should go to the epics for those OKRs and actually flesh them out. So when we say like chat ops tagging for pages, we mean specifically we're calling out so that in the release issue, when someone runs chat ops tag or whatever it is, like we're specifically calling out what that actually means, because I feel like there's so many, the words tag, branch, chat ops, release have kind of lost all meaning to me now at some point. So I'd like to try and focus on, basically I'm just trying to understand the OKRs from a very, this is what we want, and maybe that will help drive the investigation epic as well, because I feel like I definitely, what I thought was what the OKRs were, and now what I think they are very different things. So I feel like maybe we should close that gap.
Can I just
maybe it
jump
was
in
just
then
me
and
that
say that
misunderstood.
bit then? Because I think that's a super good point. Let's all make sure we know what the OKRs are as a starting point, right? Because I think we have a few things running in parallel, which is needed, but I think we need to be clear what the paths are so that we don't need to answer the entire self-serve question right now, right? Let's be clear on that one. So the actual OKRs, let me actually get these accurate. So I just got to log into Ali. So what we know is, as delivery group, we are working towards the platform's direction stuff, right? So I'd recommend everyone spend some time, take a look through the handbook, make sure you're really on board with what that means. That's the direction we're headed in. But what we're actually trying to do this quarter is, the OKR is written as, I'll add you the link to this after as well, so you can jump in, but just for now. So the overall, for this particular, for what we're talking about in this particular demo, the objective is defining a path towards self-serve deployments and moving two components towards this state. And what we've got written as the key results for that, and it's deliberately open so that we can adjust if we need to, but I think from what we've seen so far this quarter, I don't think we will need to. And the key results are, actually I could use this UI. Here we go. So we have three pieces to this. The first one is completing the self-serve deployments blueprint. So this is going to be our target for the next year or so, 2-3 years maybe of work. So that's the first piece, which is in progress. That's going well. The second key result is to work with Configure to enable auto deploys and chat ops tagging for GitLab agent service. So I think you're right in what you're saying, Graham, which is, sorry, go ahead.
No, you keep going.
Okay. Which I think is quite a well-known thing. I'm hoping this isn't an enormous piece of work, and I'm hoping it's reasonably well-known. And then the third one is working with editor group to enable chat ops tagging for the pages service. Again, I'm hoping that's a reasonably well-known piece of work.
So maybe it's just me, but that still is not entirely well-known. But Alessio,
Yeah.
what were you going to say?
I think the chat ops tagging is probably not the best word we put there, because it's just an implementation detail. Actually, chat ops tagging is doing nothing. It's just an entry point to something that is defined in release tools.
Okay, what would be a better word? Tagging?
Yeah, I mean, why don't we take a look at this thing together, starting from the discussion
Before we dive in, what I just wanted to add as a final piece on this OKR, what we're actually trying to achieve this quarter, right? So so we have these quite focused kind of pieces that hopefully improve things for Configure and hopefully improve things for editor. And then what we know coming in Q4 is we actually get to work with Configure and package and hopefully do some more of the self-serve stuff. So what I'm hoping is that we'll find that this quarter is reasonably straightforward on implementation, and that gives us some space to figure out what are the foundational pieces we want to do for self-serve, and then we can figure out working on those, so like POC or all of that stuff. But I think let's push all of that back later into the quarter so that we can just sort of scope down what we're working on right now and get some issues and epics, things ready to pick up.
Okay. By the way, if you want a better word, instead of chat up tagging, we refer this as automated release. So you want release automation. How
And
it
even
happens?
that, see, yeah, right, okay. But even
Still
that,
big
I
though,
think,
yeah.
like,
No.
so are
it
we?
isn't.
And I think, well, maybe to you, and maybe that's the thing here. That maybe
Yeah,
that's where
Let's
we
break
need
down
to.
what we actually want that to be. Yeah, I think that would be better.
Are we talking about? So the other thing is that is confusing to me, and maybe once again, this is just my perception, or whatever. Is when we say release, do we mean auto deploy or self-managed releases?
Yeah. Really, can we go through the table that I did when we were doing the OKR description, because there are many conflicting things that are happening in this conversation that are actually
Okay.
easily linked together, but we are so this investigation got sidetracked by the details, and that's part of a bigger issue, which is that we, for historical reason, implemented the same thing with different code path and different names. That's why things seems more complex than what they are, right? So let me try to briefly work through one comment that I wrote in the OKR description to see if this help to clear some of the what we mean when we say something. Let's try this. So I'm gonna share this page here. Sorry. So this was part of the OKR planning, and basically we were defining this. Let's call them 5 steps, right, toward self-serve deployment. These are all based on things that we already have today on some components. So here is a kind of a high-level description. Below, I think there is also some kind of requirement list for each step. But let's start with this very simple. So we have this step 1, which is, do we have a version file or not in the GitLab repo? And then we have the table that breaks this down by component, who has it and who don't. Only registry don't have it right now, right? So then we have automated rollout, which is auto deploy. Automated rollout means that if something is in auto deploy, what does it mean to be into auto deploy? It means that because it has a version file, when we tag auto deploy, by default, we propagate version files to the packagers. So this column here means, are we acting on that specific component when we roll out auto deploy or not? Example, Gitlab, yes, we do, because when we installed the Gitlab version that is part of every auto deploy package. Yes, we don't, even though it's part of it. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, see, I think then we should probably call that out, because to me, automated rollout, you can do a version bump directly in gitlab.com for CAS, and it will automatically roll it out in order across the environments. So I'm kind of like, well, I know I'm being pedantic, but I just want to be clear, like, if we're saying automated rollout there, then we should clarify that means via the standard auto deploy process, not just.
Yeah, I think we should change some of the wording a bit on this table. Like, I think the concept is good, but let's
the concept
we wrote this, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
I just want to make sure that we in this call understand what we're talking about, so we can find better words that we can also use outside of this, right? Then, so automated rollout, is it clear to anyone? Registry and CAS are, and yeah, also Metric Export are the only one not implemented in this, right? Because everything else is installed when we do an auto deployment. Does this make sense to everyone? Okay. Then we have automated release, which is what I think is in the scope of the OKR for this quarter for pages and CAS. What does it mean? So basically, automated release means that when we do a monthly patch, security, any type of customer-facing release which is not auto-deploy, the content of the single source of truth, which is the version file, is reflected into a tag being prepared for that component. So as you can see, Gitlab is the only one implementing this, and is the thing that was investigated by part of this, the epics that we are working on, which is basically we can call this product version alignment, which means we do 15.4. something, then every component goes through an automation that makes that 15.4. something for them based on.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Yeah, based on what was deployed. So this is where auto deploy gets into on-premise releases.
Just say that piece
Okay.
again. Say it's just run through automated releases again, or ask good questions, Graham.
Yeah, let's do
No.
Graham's question first. Well, then
So what happens for it? Because I thought I thought that everything did have automated release. So for everything that doesn't, how does it get into a package for customers if not automated?
Yeah, that's the point. So you are thinking, I think you're thinking a step right to what I'm thinking. So I am in the realm of the component repository. So each component developer must create its own release with the custom process that they defined in their own repo, which is the things that you were investigating. But if you look at Gitlab, they don't. They get all of this for free with it, and there is a price for this. Price is that you can't define your own versioning because it has to be aligned, and you must apply the changelog system that we have in the product, because we do the API changelog generation. There is a third price which is part of discussion happening in an issue related to pages that we can dig a bit deeper, but it's important for all of us to understand, which is by doing automated release, components get a tag in the release even when there is no changes for them specifically. So we're gonna do a patch release. We do a patch release globally. So if the stable branch for that component is in the same state as previous, we just retag. They get an empty changelog, but it keeps things aligned. Okay, is this clear now?
That part is yes. So it's basically, see, to me, I thought it was automated releases as in going out the door releases, but I see it's kind of like delivery managed releases. We manage your delivery managed component releases. So the releases of the component are managed by delivery.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, because I think the thing is because you have releases for the component and releases for GitLab, which the component is inside the release for GitLab. And I think that's what kind of gets confusing. So we need to call specifically
not
this
all
is
of them,
component
right? And
releases.
I think that's one thing we were talking about a little bit last week, right? So for are you meaning like the things that get kind of like gems that get sort of tagged and released independently? Is that what you're referring to there, Graham?
No, so the components like CAS, Pages is a good one. Their versioning scheme is like version 123, 124, 125. But Gitlab, but Gitlab, and I didn't realize this until we did this whole exercise. And obviously, Alessio knows all this, but I don't. But Gitlab, their versioning is 15.4 every new month. They got it's literally 1-to-1. And I think, Amy, I talked to you this, we chatted about this before, like a single, we talked about like a defined versioning scheme. But when I was talking about that or thinking about that, what I didn't realize is we actually already have that, and we have the automation for it. It's just the GitLab versioning scheme. So essentially it's like, we want all components to ditch their own versioning scheme and align with the GitLab versioning scheme. And then all of a sudden it unlocks all this automation we can give them. I think that might be the best way to describe it.
And so
Yeah.
what we're doing at the moment for things that aren't using the GitLab versioning scheme, we re-version them. Is that correct? I feel like you've gone through this in detail with me before.
We do a
Alessia.
big bump. Basically, we do, if they applied, we just move from version 1 to version 15. We did this for Gitlab. There is an issue opened by Vladimir for pages that we were just saying, why don't we align things? Because it makes security release easier. I mean, I've been through this as a workers maintainer, as a pages maintainers. It's really a pain when you do security releases for components, not only because the number of merge requests just skyrocket. You go from 4 merge requests to 16 or even more, depending on the deployment mechanism. But also, you need to do a lot of investigation to figure out what versions were included in the last 3 stable releases. And then you have to pre-allocate version numbers because you do the development in the mirror, but because the number are independently released, then you can't release a new component version publicly in the meantime because you are keeping hold on version numbering. That's the nightmare. It happened last month, I think, with pages where this things was done in the wrong order, and they basically got stalled with the version numbers because they couldn't release.
And
so
then even
can we just grab that little thought, right? Like that should be an issue, right? The whole complexity around versioning. And I think that would be a really good thing to pull from all of these sort of broad discussions, which is like the specifics of I mean, I know it's kind of covered in this table, but I don't think we have the details, right? And I think what we're trying to do is get to the full team understanding of why a version is difficult when you do a security release like pages, right? If we all have that knowledge, I think we'll be in a better position. So I don't know if it fits in some of the analysis issues we already have open, but would someone mind taking an action so that we actually have like a deep view of maybe just pages versioning, and we can think about how it applies to others?
I have a proposal for this that I'm going to say at the end of this table, because because I think it's my solution to why we are struggling with how we are documenting things, and an alternative proposal of how we should try to document those things. So we are on automated release. I hope this is now clear. That's, as I said, as Amy was asking me to repeat, that's the point where auto deploy gets into on-premise releases. Why is that? So up to this point here, so before we tag a public release, we can run with images built on SHA, which is what we're doing for Gitlab. So in theory, because the system is managing releases for developers, they don't have to release anything, which means that they can just bump the version at this point in time as a manual bump. They can bump the version with SHA. They say, I think this is a production ready version of CAS. This is the SHA number, so I'm gonna bump the SHA version on the component, and it will get into auto deploy. And when it's the 22nd, it will be tagged accordingly and released.
So I'm still trying to understand why building from SHA is important. Like, if a component, let's say CAS, for example, if they're on the versioning scheme, I guess if you adopt, I think this is a tricky part here. If you adopt the GitLab versioning scheme, like 15 to whatever, you can't cut your own, like,
yeah.
So
you can't.
This
you
is
can
the
have
thing.
ERCs. We gave ERCs to Gitlab because they need to release the gem, but you can't.
Yeah.
That's the point. You can't.
Yes. So I think this is actually a really key point for all of this as well, especially when we talk to developers around this. So at the moment, CAS can tag whenever they want, right? They can literally go in, create their own tags, then they go to the SSOT like the version file, and put that tag number in, whatever it is, version 123, version 456. But if you adopt the GitLab versioning system, and that's good for you because you get a bunch of I think branch automation is the big one, right? Like getting branches created for you and stuff. But what you can't do is you can't, as a developer, cannot tag, because it's our job to tag, not your job anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a huge kind of thing that people. So
that's
now
a big drawback
understand,
that they have to understand. And
now I understand why we need this building from SHA, because you can't have your own tags anymore. So the only thing you're left with is git shars to like reference.
Yeah. I have to say. Yeah, continue. I'll tell you something.
Oh, no, I was going to say that is a big, like, that's a shift. It's a good shift. It all makes sense, but it is a shift that we need to capture, because I think people, especially like building from SHA and things like that, they just won't immediately jump to or gather.
Yeah. So the good point here is, the good news here is that building from SHA prepares you to continuous delivery. Because in continuous delivery, you don't want to create packages. Packages are ephemeral. You just want to have a point in time in the history of your code. But there is an alternative option that we never did before. I mean, never. Gitlab is the only component at this level of automation and is not doing it. So that's the point. We could do two taggings, something like, an example, say CAS want to tag their own things to mark what they think is ready to be included in the product, but then it's kind of an internal information, right? So they could do something like tagging by, say, internal dash their own versioning.
Sure, yeah.
That means that when they release something internally with no need to change log or anything like that, they can bump this version here with their internal version.
Yeah, so they can actually,
so they can go as low as they want.
Yeah.
We never done this before, but actually it works. And the point is that when things get out of the door for customers, things are aligned with how do we do change logs? That's how we do change logs. How do we create stable branches? Because this opens the door for something that is not here, that is not in scope with for this OKR, but it is how can I give all of the components a clear and understandable security release process, which is streamlined, which is the same regardless of what are you working on. How can I make sure that patch releases get out correctly?
So I'm just in the interest of time circling back to the OKRs. So the OKRs are to get CAS into auto deploy. So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm hoping I'm not wandering too far off here. You commented, Alessio, that you're getting CAS to build on SHA, which is great. But technically that's not needed for auto deploy, right? Like at the moment, if CAS wanted to go into auto deploy, okay, cool. So that is good for CAS, but it's really good for CAS for automated release.
Yeah.
The auto deploy problems, I know we're kind of jumping around in the agenda here, and I do apologize. So the auto deploy problems for CAS are actually very, very simple. We just need Canary, really. And
Canary and health metrics. They already have, according to the regular SLO, but they are not part, they don't.
So we just need to wraps up some Prometheus metrics into the health. Yeah, okay, cool. So there are some clearly defined tasks we can split out on that epic there.
Yeah,
okay.
And one other question I have as well, which I know we talked a bit about in the past, Graham, I don't know if we've got an answer on, is we know that at the moment CAS has pre available as part of their sort of, I don't know if they test on it, but certainly they do a deploy to pre as kind of a piece of their deployment. They will, if we just go with the vanilla auto deploy, they lose that. So we should probably figure out if they actually need that. I hope they don't, but we should check in with them on their actual testing.
Yeah. But they don't really lose that. They just need to reshuffle the operation they're doing, because they can build from SHA means that they could deploy a SHA.
But I think we should check with them if they actually need it, and if they do, then we can figure out a way. But I think it might be useful I think it'd be an interesting conversation to actually be like, part of our auto deploy doesn't generally use pre. Are they actually using it?
I'm pretty sure from my working with them, they don't. They just do it because we've asked them to do it. Because
I suspect so, yeah.
But yes, we should just double check that with them, because they will still get to be able to test it in pre, but it's RCs like everything else. You can go and test an RC in pre at release time if you so desire.
I'm going to conclude this table because we are at the end, and this is the last step are easy enough. So automated update is just a script that is part of release tools that makes sure that this file here, the version file, is automatically bumped to the last green pipeline on master of your component. So this ties back into this one and kind of gives you, call it continuous delivery. Not really, because it's aligned to auto deploy yet, but that's the closest thing to continuous delivery you can have. So that's simple. Yeah, go ahead.
Where's the automation for that live? I know this is a release bit of a technical detail. Okay, cool.
It's in release tools. It's a simple step. Create a merge request so that it runs the integration test and pre-approve and preset merge when pipeline is green using 2 tokens. That's what is happening. It's very simple one. There are problems here, like it can fail and things like that. There are pain point here, but this is not. Yeah, man, this is not really part of. I mean, it's a later step. So just be aware of what does it mean. Independent deploy. That's a greenfield. So the question is, once we have things automated up to this point, which we can treat all of them independently and manage releases and things like that, how do we deploy them independently and still keeping track of what is inside of a package? Because everything up to here starts with the single source of truth is the code on Rails, and from there we propagate versions. Here, there's a big change because things could be deployed independently, so we need to backtrack.
So I think independent, once you go into auto deploy, you lose independent deploy.
Yeah,
I suspect. Yeah, I suspect that's what when we move these guys over, they will lose independent deploy, and then the next stage of independent deploy becomes the self-managed blueprint, like the self-managed,
which we want to define as part of.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm just with that chart. It's like as soon as you switch CAS to automated rollout, independent deploy switch. They switch over, which I think is an important point to know.
Where it is? I just wanted to. Was it here? Yeah. Basically, here there is a kind of what do we actually need to give a component each of those steps, and that's the thing, right? Here was auto deploys was in here, right? So automated rollout, auto deploys. It's about metrics. It's about tracking component versions when we deploy. So this is kind of a high level information of what does it mean to complete that stage for a given component. So that's something we can break down through. And that's it. Oh yeah, that's one, right? So we say we need to be able to build from SHA to give things automated releases, and these are kind of an entry point to that conversation. What? Oh God, yeah, before I go ahead, do you have question? Okay, so my take, let me stop sharing. So what I'm going to suggest to try to make this easier to work on is try to define process by the steps that we described instead of digging too deep into every single code detail of how we do things today. For instance, I would consider removing entirely everything like security releases, patch releases, and things like that. They are kind of out of scope. They once you bring things into release automation, in automated releases, you kind of have the entry point because you build them the stable branch and things like that. And then next quarter or in the future, when we are ready to tackle this, we can streamline the release process for everything, not just for components or Rails. Because
is there any value though right now in? So I think my guess, Alessio, is you're perhaps the only person who understands what happened with the Pages security release. Like I do think there's probably some value, and maybe we don't need to know every single step, but I think we probably need to know enough about how Pages security release works so that we understand what the pain points are. But yeah, for a lot of the other pieces, we certainly don't need to know every single step. I think that's probably true.
What I was meaning with this is that instead of repeating those things for every component, is more about with release automation you gain this, and that's a benefit because, example, security releases are painful, and you explain briefly what does it mean to create a security release for a generic component. And then by component, we can, because describing this way, we can identify requirements. So what do we need to give you automated releases? And basically, we get this by looking at what we have in Gitlab. Yeah, that's the name, right? So,
yeah, I was about to say, should we just assume that Gitlab is the gold standard and like everything should just be like
no,
Gitlab?
because he has problems, so that's
kind
of
really
the baseline, but we would like not to bring pain points to the new component. That's the tricky part of it.
But I think we can simplify even further, right? Like I think we have a good idea for CAS, right? So I think under agenda item 2, right, I think we know what needs to happen, and we know what we're missing, and we know what we need to ask configure about. So I feel like we've got a decent idea around what we need to do with CAS. So we probably need to make sure they are aware about what they lose and that pull that together. But I think we have a good understanding for that. So I think then,
for auto deploy or for
release? No, auto deploy.
Okay, yeah. So auto deploy for CAS is pretty straightforward.
Which is quite straightforward, right? So then, because we know that CAS is probably going to take a little while to get to auto deploy because of Canary, I think that means the next thing we can be thinking about is the Pages automated release, and I think we do need to figure out what that name is. But if we think about that as it's not currently blocked, so what are the pieces we need to understand around how it currently works, or what went wrong, or what's going on at Gitlab, and maybe just focus in on that epic.
Yeah.
Alessio, do you need something to be in auto deploy before you can do automated releases? Do you have to have it in auto deploy first? Yeah, that's what I thought as well. So technically we're not blocked for CAS.
Oh, okay. I thought you did. I thought it was like you went into auto deploy and then you moved out. Okay.
Because I think it's going to be like, we'll have to change their branch. Like we'll have to change their branching. It sounds like we're going to have to modify release tools and bits and pieces. So I'm still curious, if we don't consider Gitlab the gold standard, how do we define what is or what we're trying to get them to, Dan?
I mean, Gitlab has some problem in how the process behave. How do we spot errors? And the biggest problem with Gitlab is that we had an idea and we forced the process into the team. What we want to do here is more about describing the benefits and say, do you want this? Because if you get this, this is what you no longer have to do. So just describing the security release process and say, this all goes away. You just merge things into the stable branches and you get things tagged for you. It's a huge benefit. There are drawbacks. We mentioned them. So you lose the ability to tag independently. You need to be version aligned and things like that. So if we are clear up front on what we give them, then basically we have a buy-in from them. Say, I want to enroll in this because I see the benefit.
But I think they already have buy-in. I mean, they'd be happy with anything.
But
I think getting the buy-in is.
They have, but there are other components there. So if we are going to write this down well enough now, then we can just point the next round of components that we want to integrate. Say that's the thing, right? So this is release automation, and that's how it behave. These are the components already in. That's the benefit. That's what you lose. at this stage, we are doing this for them, but tomorrow a new component come in and they have a recipe to follow, so they can just do the things by themselves.
So part of it then is coming out with a formal document around, like, we probably need to define a name. I do think we need to define it, even if we make up a name.
Yeah. Well,
like
let's do this
pajamas or
iteratively,
something,
right? Because I think there's two iterative pieces we're talking about here, right? One is, I think the first bit to answer your question, Graham, of what are we aiming for? Like, I do think we should consider, is there a thing we can do to the Gitlab process that it makes it a slightly better process for whoever comes next, right? Like, is there an iterative improvement we can see? If so, let's try and improve it. And then I think we can also, it's iterative, right? So let's not try sit right now and write the perfect sort of document that everyone would sign up to, but we should certainly be aiming towards that. We know we have 2 components. In fact, we know we have 3 components that are really bought in with this: pages, CAS, registry. So we don't need to do very much selling for those 3. We know they're all super keen. But as we come out of setting those 3 up, like maybe end of Q4, then let's make sure we are ready so that we can go and kind of try and convince people who are probably not so keen to actually consider approaching it.
Yeah, it's also very important for all of us to really understand deeply what all those things means, right? Because then people will reach out and ask.
That's it. Exactly.
Yeah, so the more we get this out of my head into everyone, into the team knowledge.
Agreed. Agreed.
So I guess that comes back to them. Where do we feel with Matt's original point, and I guess the epic that I can see now, obviously I've dived a little bit too deep in some of the stuff in that epic, although probably a really good learning experience, even if it's not inherently useful to our goals. Is it really then, I think perhaps maybe you're right, Alessio, maybe with that epic, because we were just like, let's document the patch process, like perhaps we just put some stuff in there, like of what we're trying to document and capture, but it was kind of a bit too much for what we needed, and we need to pull that back. I still think it was really good, like even the stuff on Gitlab.
I agree. I think it's really useful, and I think as long as we stay focused on CAS, pages, Gitlab, it's super useful, right? Like, we maybe don't want to do it to this depth for every single component ever, but I think for getting on the right page right now and understanding, I think we've all learned stuff. I think we've all gone, oh, it doesn't work how I thought it worked. And even as I was reading the comments yesterday, I was like, okay, I don't know what's happening in that step. Like, I actually have no concept of that individual step. So I think it is really useful, but we probably don't want to try and get here is a complete documentation for every piece of deployments and releases. Like, we could spend years doing that.
Yeah, also because our end goal is to streamline that process. So we're gonna change everything. Where diverge from the others means that there are opportunity there to change it, but let's focus to the automation part that we have this quarter.
So we're running up on time. So I guess as I think probably 2 things jump out for me on what we have on the analysis stuff. One is, does everybody have a concept of what the Gitlab pain points are?
I wouldn't say I in depth have it yet, but I haven't really read through the Gitlab stuff.
Let's make sure we get that as an action. I know Myra's busy on the security release, whatever, but I think as a Gitlab component, Gitlab analysis issue is complete, let's make sure, as well as knowing roughly how that's working, we really understand what the Gitlab team find difficult about the process, because we can't just pick up the Gitlab process and add it to other components anyway, because they're on VMs, they have different dependencies, they have complexity that we don't have on other components. So that's kind of a good start. But I really think we should just be really careful of knowing what's painful from their experience. And then probably the other question I had is around pages. Do we know enough about, like, I feel like with CAS, we have a good understanding of kind of its dependencies and kind of how the configure team generally work day to day, do we have the same kind of understanding about pages and how the which team owns it, the editor group is kind of working with pages? I know there are super new owners for this stuff, so those are kind of question marks at least I have.
Yeah, ownership there is a bit of a tricky. So because if you look at say directional / architecture conversation happening in there, they are from people that are not part of that stage group, because you can see me, you can see Vladimir, you can see Gregors, because all of us being former ops engineer from the ops stage, we were working on this when pages was part of ops release.
Yeah,
so there's a transition that is happening. So yeah, maybe it's, I mean, they are willing to change things, so probably can
right, that's it, that's it. It might be that they in a way simpler in that they probably are going to just want the easiest thing, right? Let's load it all inside auto deploys and releases and we've just wrapped them up, like, but that's certainly a question mark. I think we should, as part of the analysis, we should probably figure out what they actually,
they are already in auto deploy.
Oh,
so it's just that they bump things manually very rarely, and
that's what I mean.
No
all of that
usually.
stuff. Yeah. I think as long as they just want to join in with everyone else, then there's probably not so much special stuff going on there. Should we grab some actions from this discussion? So can I propose as an immediate action that we try and get a really tight definition of what automated release means? Not calling it that, because I think it comes with preconceived sort of ideas that you'll be pressing a button and getting your own patch release on demand type of stuff. But I think we should try and condense down those words into, like, it's kind of like automation into scheduled self-managed releases, or some concept that we can just use really widely and means what we want it to mean. Who would like to take a stab at that?
I'm happy to if no one else will.
Listen, thanks, Graham.
So I'll just create a delivery team, like an issue just straight in the delivery tracker, or should I have it off a specific epic? Or
no, it's absolutely fine. Just drop it in the delivery tracker. We've got a self-serve deployment label you can stick on it, so we'll be able to locate it. But yeah, that's absolutely fine. Just an issue somewhere would be super.
And just for my own clarification, we really just want to get out of this a targeted like name or something we can give people that has a distinct meaning, and then like a fairly high level but still a little bit low level definition about what you get. What you get.
Perfect. Exactly. Yeah, something that we can use to replace the like chat ops tagging words and all of those things with this is what it's called, and we can just apply uniformly. Cool. Thanks for that. What else would be useful? Matt, you've got a kind of issue that you're kind of thinking through about how we sort of wrap up this epic and pull together some analysis things. Like, what would be a useful action to take from this discussion to help that move along?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the main thing that was in my head through a lot of the discussion was actually what we literally just covered, which is defining exactly what the next step looks like for these components and exactly what we mean when we say automated releases. Because, well, like you said, I don't think we're in a place where any of us can confidently and fully explain exactly what that means to anybody that comes along, and that's a problem. I mean, I definitely can't. Even after this call, I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen, because I'm still like, no, I need that a few more times to get it cemented in my own head. So getting that down and getting that agreed upon across the board is going to be really important. And if anything, I kind of feel like that is sort of quite a helpful direction in defining exactly where this epic needs to be tied off. Like once we know exactly what that is, we can say, okay, well, this epic only needs to do as much as we need in order to understand what that definition means for us, and what we need to do to translate that definition into CAS and pages. Because right now, there's just a whole heap of stuff that we can pick from, but we don't really know what we're picking from it because we don't know what the definition of the thing is that we're trying to accomplish actually means. So I kind of feel like we need to get that online first to help us understand where the epic ends.
Okay.
How do we feel of instead of just giving a clear definition of automated releases, just going through all the 5 steps so that each one of them has a clear name? Could be the one that is already in there, could be a new one with a set of say expectation or requirements. So something is needed in order to have this, and kind of a dependency graph between them. So can I have, for instance, Graham say, oh, so we can have automated release without having auto deploy. That's true, right? So they are linear because they kind of reflect how we went to them. So how we implemented them sequentially, but for some of them are there are branching points where you can go parallel in some of them, and then maybe just looking at everything, there is a junction point where in order to get to the next step, you have to complete both tracks. So let's say in independent releases, automated releases, and auto deploy as an example, right? So they can go in parallel, but then if you want to move to independent deploy, probably you need to have completed all of them.
One
Yeah,
question, like, I mean, does that help us a lot? Like, I know it's helpful for us, I guess, to know that we're not blocked on CAS Canary, but I wonder in terms of kind of future planning, like, does that help us, or does that kind of add complexity, if that makes sense? You know, like, is it easier for us to go, okay, we want people to move through things in this way versus having people just dropping in and saying, I want step 5?
Yeah, that's the point, right? So because we care about the initial steps, for instance, auto deploy and automated rollout, but this is not of any concern for developers. They want automated releases, which has no dependency on the other one. But then if they actually want independent deployment, they need to have all of them, right? So what I'm saying is that I don't want to force process on people, because when we say to people, do you need to implement the QA because you want to get into auto deploy, they are just struggling why they could get a lot of benefits by just doing automated releases.
Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying. So maybe as an iterative approach, then we want to define these things, and then maybe want to talk about requirement. Like, I kind of agree with what you're saying, but I think if we can, it'll be easier to see how they relate to each other and their requirements if we can define them first.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm kind of like,
let's define them and try to, because what I'm thinking is that if we force the process onto people, we get into a situation where they may just push back. But if we give them a menu that they can choose, I want to get this, then they see the benefit and maybe they want to get more. So everyone has its own need. The most important need, they may find time to implement one of that. And then basically we are upselling. But instead of having a linear path where you say you need to do this, this, and that, the entry point is easier. You can choose what is most valuable to you as a development team, but then you experience the benefit and maybe want to get the extra implementation and move on to a complete independent deployment.
Okay. Do you want to have a stab at all of those, Graham, or do you want to just do automated releases and have everyone sort of take one or two of the definitions?
I don't particularly mind.
Should we do this collaboratively on Google Drive instead of an issue as a first
Yeah,
step?
let's do
so
it.
probably going to be easier for all of us to write things down
helps.
and iterate faster, and then we.
Great.
Okay.
So awesome. One thing I would like us to sort of be starting to work on is, I don't mind if it's CAS or pages, but I would like us to get an epic set up for moving like getting Epic and getting issues, trying to get that set up for moving to the automated releases per stage. I don't know if we know enough. It might be that we start writing it and we don't know all the pieces. We have questions, but I would like, given we're kind of 1 month into this quarter now, I'd quite like us to start moving out of the analysis and actually being like, what are the pieces we can start working on?
I agree. I think that has possibly been the key piece. If we start fleshing them out, what'll happen is when we get stuck on them, then we drive back to the analysis epic. Like then we're like, okay, we're getting stuck. You know, what's going on? We drive back to the analysis epic. Maybe we do some code jumping then because, you know, somewhere buried in some class there was like something for Gitlab that we completely missed or something. But at least then it does drive. What are you trying to achieve by the analysis?
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So should we aim then just for like next Wednesday as a kind of deadline to get the definitions all done, and hopefully that gives us also an endpoint on the analysis, because we'll be like, okay, we know enough, focusing on the auto releases and auto deploy just for CAS and pages.
Yep. So to be clear, we should have 3 clear epics, each matching the OKR. There's auto deploy for CAS, which honestly is pretty straightforward. It needs to be fleshed out, but I think or at least I know enough of the pieces there to flesh that out.
We've got most of it on Epic 720. I think we just need to go and do add the blockers, update a few pieces, check that's got everything we need. But I think we've got the bulk of it on 720.
Yeah, sure. I thought that one still had like no description or whatever, but I haven't looked at it in a while, so that's fine. But yeah, anyway, we've got the epic for that, and then we just need 2 more. Then one for this. Well, we got to define what we're going to call this, and then we should have an epic saying delivery defined releasing or whatever it is we want to call it, for pages, and then delivery defined releasing for delivery controlled releasing for CAS.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the CAS ones we can still work independently, because I think the CAS one will take, the auto deploy one will take a bit longer, but we can probably start moving the release part for them quicker. And I know they're off at the moment, so it's going to be a bit tricky, but I still think if we get enough ready, so as soon as we're back from holiday, we're just like, here, we can just do this now and change it around, and you get all these benefits, as Alessio was saying. We just sell it to them. I'm pretty sure they'll buy in straight away, and then we can just crack it out. But if not, then we can focus on pages as the first one that we actually kind of. And I think, once again, without digging into too much depth, we're actually going to have to like hack into code on release tools and stuff, right, Alessio? Like when we actually do this, like we're going to have to kind of start, because they're going to have to, because we've got to do the automated branches and stuff. So we're actually going to have to.
We need to build the public release classes for those components.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's fine. It's just, okay. So there's actually going to, it won't just be, it's not a process change, it's a technical change as well, I guess, is what I'm,
And as we do that, like it would be certainly interesting when we do the first component to be reviewing, is there a way we can make this so it's really easy to add other components in the future, right? Given that each component will probably go through that. So something to keep in mind.
Me and Alessio discussed this before. Ideally, because we do have a class for each component that's got code and slightly different, the end result from a technical level is you just have a generic class kind of implementation, right? Which we can't get there all the way yet, but yes, you're right. As we do these 2 components, we would hope that even if we do component specific classes, they should look almost similar, that we could start trying to, in the future, squeeze that down, so we don't the concept of a component class just doesn't exist.
Cool. Cool. So I put those epics under B and C. I won't assign them to anyone just now. Like we'll focus on doing the naming and the definitions. But like once we've got those, if anyone wants to jump on and get one or 2 set up, then just please go for it. Right? We don't have an epic right now. Right. I think we're done. We're at time. Thanks for the discussions, everyone. Let us stick up a doc, Graham, ping us all in there, and let's see if we can get some definitions locked in.
It might be my time tomorrow morning, my time, so you may not see it till then. But
yeah, it's late for you, I know that for sure. Yeah.
Bye.
Cool. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care. Bye.